or any other funding agency like banks. So they try to draw a kind of boundary of this project and say exactly what are the deliverables and what are not the deliverables also, in case to avoid any kind of dispute later. So sometimes, as I said, what is not to be done, that is also mentioned in the project scope. So all the detailed specifications, dimensions, or any features which are expected from the project are mentioned in that document. That is called scope of a project. At the same time, we also came to know about something which is called scope creep. Scope creep is something which is undesirable, and any process, project manager or planner uh, will not to have this kind of scope creep happens later on. The reason is that they are very detrimental for the success of the project, because ultimately if the scope creep is substantial, then maybe it will lead to the cancellation or abandonment of the project. I cited some examples. So one of that was some BBC kind of project which was abandoned because of this kind of scope creep. There is another example. I can show you the slide. Yes, this is another example of a scope creep. How because of scope creep, this Berlin airport project was cancelled during 2006 and 11. So practically it happens because of the reasons, as you know, there are some miscommunications, misunderstandings, or maybe more expectations from the stakeholders. So because of that, there will be some disputes, there will be some budgetary issues, and there will be some technology issues because the kind of technology may become obsolete in the meantime. So it happens, and nobody will like to have it. So let me quickly tell you this example. This is a notorious project failure example of Berlin Airport. The construction started in 2006, and the airport would take 5 years to be built, and the target opening date was October 30, 2011. So this is also the schedule. You know, all the projects must have a definite start and end time. So there was a definite end time, that is October 2011. And what happened actually, this scope creep takes place during this project execution. So several and major changes happen in the scope, and that we call as the scope creep. One instance was when, with construction underway, one of the key stakeholders, that is the GM of the airport management company, seizing on increasing forecasts for air traffic, asked the architect to add north and south piers to the main terminal, turning it from a rectangle into a U shape and dramatically enlarging the floor space. See, practically what happened. Suppose initially the project, the airport project, was of rectangular structure design, right, architecture. But as the the project started, right, one of the important or key stakeholder of that airport, the GM level, so he advised that no, we can have a U shape because that is better. He may have some logics or reasons, but what actually happened when he suggested these U and maybe insisting on that, so what happened, the floor space increased dramatically. At the same time, there are other roadblocks came in, right? uh, so this is a typical example of scope creep. And when the stakeholder who are having increased demand during the execution of the project, so that will lead to cancellation of the project. So that actually happens. So the stakeholders, too many and with different interests. So this is the reason that when there are many stakeholders are involved and they don't converge to the same kind of scope, then usually these kind of things happen. Communication is also important to report the real status, and particularly communication, good communication is required during the preparation of the scope document at the beginning stage itself. If it is properly communicated and accepted by all the parties and they agree upon it, so there is less chance that later on they will backtrack. But if you have not involved all the stakeholders completely, so scope creeps may take place, and you know what are the bad effects of that. So these are some of the examples. You may find many more examples which are responsible for the failure of a project. So let us proceed. So we discussed the two terms, that is the scope of a project and what is the meaning of scope creep. Now, what are the advantages or benefits you will get if you are preparing a nice project scope, right? What are the benefits? The project scope statement has these benefits. It articulates what the project entails so that all stakeholders can understand what is involved. It provides a roadmap that managers can use to assign tasks, schedule work, and budget approach. So this second point is also very interesting, because see, ultimately the project manager has the responsibility to carry out the project, means to execute that, to bring it on ground. So during that, if the project manager does not know what exactly the client or the company who is funding the project expects, then it is very difficult to fulfill that, right? Whereas this project scope document is exactly tells the project manager what is expected from the project, what are the deliverables, what are the specifications, what are the budget, what are the time frame. So it works as a roadmap, it works as a kind of a guideline or kind of a beacon for the project manager to follow the right path, right? So it helps the project manager also to a very large extent. It helps focus team members on common objectives and prevents projects, particularly complex ones, from expanding beyond the established vision. So as it usually happens, if it is a very complex and large scale project, so if you not have a good control over it, so there are very high chance that it will get expanded, means unnecessarily it will get expanded, because you don't have any control, because you do not know exactly what is the boundary. For these kind of reasons, a proper project scope document is required. Of course, project scope document or the term of reference is part of your initial project report that you are going to produce. You might have heard of this term, that is called DPR. In short, DPR means in business circles, DPR means detailed project report. So they call it DPR. And this DPR is formed at the initial stage of the project, which contains all the details of the project, including the scope statement, right? So what exactly you are going to do, who will be the funding agencies, who will be the customers, what are the risks, many things are involved in the, what is the schedule, what are the resources to be used. So every detail, you might have heard that you prepare a project report and submit it somewhere. So the meaning is that what exactly you are going to do in that project, right? You have to visualize into the future, right? You are estimating the things, maybe costs, for example. You do not know what exactly the cost will be in future, but you have to estimate, means a kind of approximation, estimation. So there will be a little bit change, no harm, but it should be within some limits, right? So preparing a budget is also a highly skilled job, because you have to look into the future and you have to estimate what are the potential or probable expenditures that are involved with this project. And so it is a highly skilled work. Means again, it is very difficult for someone who don't have the experience of preparing budget to prepare a budget for any project, or in that case for any matter, preparing a budget. So the detailed project report, as I'm saying, contains all the things, including this project scope statement. Okay, So I think these are the slides for scope and scope creep. Okay, so another slide is there. Writing a project scope statement, right? So a project scope statement is a written document that includes all the required information for producing the project deliverables. The project scope statement is more detailed than a statement of work. It helps the project team remain focused and on task. As I said, here in the project scope, you have to give the detailed specification. Simply you cannot write that this project is to build a bridge. No, that is not a scope. The bridge can be many types, whether it is a hanging bridge or a column bridge, or means there are various architectures of bridge are there. So what type of bridge, what are the specification, what materials to be used, its dimensions, everything. So that there should not be any kind of ambiguity in the during the execution stage. It should be clear to the project manager or the executor that what exactly is the deliverable of the project. So project scope helps in that. Even in the preparation of project scope, it is a very iterative process. In a single go, you cannot have a nice project scope statement. You have to iterate that, or the team who is preparing the project scope can iterate that, right? Can improve upon that by adding more and more detailed things, so that during the execution, there should not be any kind of confusion or ambiguity. The scope statement also provides the project team leader or facilitator with guidelines for making decisions about change requests during the project. Again, it is a vision. It is a vision that those who are preparing the project scope, they should also understand that what can be demands can be happen during the execution. You have to I mean, kind of visualize it, right? So in the project scope itself, they will give the guidelines that whether these features will be added or not. That is what I'm saying. You have to avoid the scope creep. So at the beginning itself, let us come back to that Berlin airport example. So if it could have been possible that during the preparation of the project scope for that airport, right, if you could mention or understand that maybe someone will demand for a U-shape airport, so they will deny it there itself, right? It will be rectangular, and U architecture will not be implemented, right? So this kind of vision is required. How to see what can be the potential kind of creeps that can happen, right? And you have to deny it from the beginning itself, in the scope itself, that this is our boundary and these are the features which are very close to the boundary, but we will not include them, so that you are not giving any scope for further addition of features. So that is the difference. So that is the last paragraph you can see, which mentions this thing. The scope statement also provides the project team leader or facilitator with guidelines for making decisions about change requests during the project. So guidelines are there. If these change requests are coming, then you have to deny it or you have to accept it, right? So that helps actually during the execution. It minimizes any kind of dispute, any kind of ambiguity or confusion during the project execution. Okay, so that way project scope is important, which is a part of your project report or DPR, that is called the detailed project report. Okay, so I hope I'm connected with you. Okay. So let us proceed, see what else is there. Yes, now I'm starting a new topic today as per your syllabus. We'll discuss for 10-15 minutes for this class, then we'll continue in the next class. So this topic is regarding project life cycle. Project life cycle, or PLC in short. Of course, PLC also looks synonym with another life cycle that is called product life cycle. Although we are here discussing project in the context of project, but you should also know there is another term which is called product life cycle. So both of them look very, similar and sometimes confusing in the short form PLC. But here the PLC is project life cycle. Okay, there is another PLC, of course, programmable logic controller. Anyway, so here we are talking about project life cycle. The project life cycle is something where, as you know, you can use this term life cycle to anything. Even we all also have a life cycle. Everything must have a life cycle, which has a definite start and end, is having a life cycle. So also a project. So you pick any typical project, you will find that it is passing through mainly four stages. Starting from its conception till its closure. Right, it passes through four typical stages. Right. Okay, so those four stages are, as you can see here in a figure, it starts from project initiation, that red color portion. Project initiation, then comes the yellow one, that is project planning, then the blue, that is project execution, and finally the green one, that is project closure. So these are the four main stages of a typical project, which pass through these four stages, right? If you take any example of a project, any example, be it doing research and development for a new vaccine, or starting one IT project, or maybe starting a new steel plant or a thermal power plant, or project for extension of railway tracks and lines, or project for a airport. All these projects must pass through these four stages. Maybe depending on the type of project, some of the stages may be, according to the kind of effort and time, may be a little bit different. It can vary in terms of time and effort, depending on the type of project. Some project may need a lot of planning, some project may need a lot of time in the execution, but more or less these four stages you can find in each and every project, right? So four stages. So just remember these four stages: project initiation, project planning, project execution, and finally project closure. Of course, the terms are very evident. You can also can guess that what may be happening in all these four stages, starting from initiation to planning, execution, and closure. But we will discuss that in detail. How these stages are, what are the functions, activities which are there inside these various stages, right? So that things we'll discuss, so that you will have a clear idea that during the execution, completion of a project, how to start, how to proceed, how to plan, how to execute, and finally how to close it properly, right? Project closure is also a very important stage. We'll discuss about that. What are the things in project closure? Anyway, so here, of course, in the white area, you can see a little bit expansion of that. Maybe you can start with project definition. That is the first point, which is below the project initiation. Project definition, then detailed planning, then monitoring and control, and finally project review, right? Which are associated with these four stages. Okay. So maybe today we'll start with the first stage, that is the project initiation. Yes. So let us just quickly, let me tell you about this project initiation phase today. Then the rest of the things will proceed later. So project initiation phase, as the name suggests, right? How a project must be started, just like we are talking about the life cycle. So everything, every product or every project or any living being or intangible thing must have a life cycle, right? It must have been created from some place, right? Then after creation, it must have done its job for which it is intended. Then after some time, it will be finished, exhausted, or you can say its life is over. It is applicable to each and everything, including living beings. So project initiation phase is the very initial phase in which the idea or the concept of the project must have born somewhere, right? If I will give you some example, let us say, suppose a organization is there or a firm is there, and they have their board of directors, right, who are the top level policy makers. So they may be meeting time and again to have some discussion or brainstorming how to I mean expand their business and everything. So maybe in a meeting when they are having a kind of discussion, right? During that brainstorming, maybe some member of that board of directors or governors, they he or she put up an idea that why not we should diversify or start a new kind of plant or project in so and so place, because there is a scope of good business there, right? Just a thought, right? Just a thought. And all the people deliberated on it, discussed it, right? So you can see that is the first idea which is conceived in the mind of that person is the initiation of that project. So that is the spark. That is the spark from which all these things will then begin, isn't it? Similarly, yeah, it is not always that it happens in a boardroom, maybe some other source, but somewhere it will start. Somewhere it will start. And once it passes through several stages, I mean, scrutinies, right? Suppose that idea was not good enough. Somebody floated an idea, but it was not good enough. So it will die out. Or people will say, no, it will not work. In the boardroom itself, it will die. That idea is not, accepted by all. It may also happen like that. But as I'm saying, if it is getting green signal in each and every stage, then only it will proceed. That idea will proceed. So there are many stages which will come in between. There will be many scrutinies, many tests, many feasibility tests. Then that project idea will be materialized slowly. We'll discuss that in the next class, how the scrutiny or kind of tests which takes place about an idea and how slowly it is being materialized, and finally you are finding a power plant or a steel plant or a hospital or something like that. But it must have started from a very small idea of somebody or a few people, right? So this way. So in the initiation phase, as the name again is the very initial stage, very preliminary stage. So it basically passes through scrutinies which are not detailed, right? Which are not detailed. It is just you are checking that thought that whether it is feasible or not, right? Whether it is feasible or not. So that kind of assessment, right? So here you can see the points are there, like initiate the project, identify the project manager, develop the project charter, conduct a feasibility study, receptive to new ideas, vision of future growth, long-term objective, SWOT analysis, preliminary project analysis, and project appraisal. Look, again, all these points are mentioned in the context of a company which is starting a new project, of course. In that context, these points are valid, right? But there are other projects out there where maybe an individual is doing a project. So maybe some of the points are not applicable there, right? Suppose you want to start your own project, very individual level, right? You want to invest in that, you have the funds, you have the idea, right? You are the sole proprietor. So in that case, maybe some of the things, points mentioned here are not applicable, but for a company which is starting a new project, so these are the relevant points which will come across, right? So in the project initiation stage, as you can see, the things happens like SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is, strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis. So it is applied to a company, of course, right? So before starting a new project, the company can also understand these things. What is its strength? What is its weakness? What is its opportunity? And what is its threat? Right. So they will not just jump into the project idea and invest in that. Right. Before that, they will make sure that this project is fulfilling all these conditions which are required. Means they have the financial capacity to invest, they have the technology know-how, they have the right kind of opportunity in the at that particular time, or what are the threats for that kind of investment. Suppose they jump into that project and invested, that may be a threat to them, right? In case of some risk or failure of the project, so that may be very harmful to the company's interest. So many things they will look into before proceeding with the idea, right? There are plenty of cases, maybe the project idea will die down in this initial stage itself, project initiation phase itself. It will not survive, that idea will not sustain, because it will not be successful. The reason is that during these kind of scrutinies, these kind of reviews at the initial stage, it will be rejected. The idea will be rejected. It may happen, right? So if it succeeds this stage, right, then we'll go to the detailed planning stage, right? So we'll discuss them in the next class. So okay, so I have many slides for this project life cycle. All right. Okay, so